They say the person you love the most is the one who holds the power to break you the deepest. And they are absolutely right. But what they don't tell you is that when you are broken into a million pieces, you get to decide how you put yourself back together. You can put the pieces back the way they were, fragile and cracked. Or you can forge those pieces into something sharp, something cold, and something completely unbreakable. For 10 years, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. My name is Elena, and my husband, David, was the kind of man everyone admired. He was charismatic, hardworking, and always had a smile that could light up a room. When we met in our early 20s, we had nothing. We lived in a tiny, cramped apartment where the heater barely worked in the winter. But we had a dream. David wanted to start his own real estate development firm, and I was his biggest believer. I drained my entire life savings to fund his first project. I worked 2 jobs so he could focus entirely on building his empire. I was his secretary, his accountant, his cheerleader, and his wife. Slowly but surely, the late nights and the endless sacrifices paid off. David's company exploded. Within a few years, we traded our freezing apartment for a massive, custom-built home in the best neighborhood in the city. We had the luxury cars, the designer clothes, and the picture-perfect life. Everyone who looked at us saw the ultimate success story. And David, he was always so grateful. Or at least that is what he told me. He would stand up at dinner parties, raise a glass, and tell all our friends, "I owe it all to Elena. She is the foundation of my life." I felt so loved. I felt so secure. I had no idea that the foundation he was talking about was already rotting from the inside out. The signs were there, of course. Looking back, they are always so obvious. The late-night meetings that suddenly became more frequent. The sudden change in his phone password. The way he would quickly minimize tabs on his laptop when I walked into his home office. But when you trust someone with your entire soul, your brain makes excuses for them. He is just stressed, I told myself. He is working hard for our future. But the truth is, a lie can only stay hidden for so long before the universe decides to drag it into the light. For me, that light came on a random Tuesday evening. David was in the shower, and his old backup tablet, the one he rarely used and left in the guest room, lit up with a notification. It was synced to his main account, a detail he had clearly forgotten. I wasn't the snooping type. I never checked his phone. But as I walked past the table, the screen glowed, and I saw a message preview. It was from a contact saved simply as C. The message read, "The closing went perfectly, baby. I can't wait to wake up in our new house tomorrow. Hurry over." I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart didn't just drop. It felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and thrown onto the icy floor. Our new house? Baby? I stared at the glowing screen, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch it. I swiped open the tablet. There was no password on this old device. And with one swipe, the perfect illusion of my 10-year marriage shattered into a million irreversible pieces. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, holding the tablet as if it were a ticking time bomb. My breath caught in my throat, and the silence of the house suddenly felt deafening. I opened the message thread with C, and what I read over the next 20 minutes completely destroyed the woman I used to be. It wasn't just a brief mistake. It wasn't the meaningless fling. This was an entire second life. C was Chloe. She was a 25-year-old interior designer that David's firm had hired 6 months ago. I had met her. I had invited her into my home. I had poured her wine and smiled at her across my dining table while she complimented my curtains. The whole time, she was sleeping with my husband. But the betrayal didn't stop at infidelity. As I scrolled through the endless stream of texts, the sick, twisted truth of David's plan began to unfold. They weren't just sneaking around in hotels. David was buying her a house. A beautiful, $500,000 townhouse in the suburbs. And worse, he was using company funds that half belonged to me, to do it. I found screenshots of bank transfers. I found emails detailing how he was slowly moving assets out of our joint accounts and hiding them in offshore LLCs. He was planning to blindside me with a divorce. He was draining our wealth so that when he finally dropped the papers on me, I would be left with absolutely nothing. He was going to push me out of the very company I had built with my own blood, sweat, and savings, leaving me penniless while he started a fresh, wealthy life with his new young girlfriend. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. I felt physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I leaned against the cool porcelain of the sink, sobbing uncontrollably. 10 years. 10 years of loyalty, of sacrificing my own dreams, of building a man from the ground up, only for him to use the very success I gave him to replace me. I stayed on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours. I let the grief wash over me. I let the shock paralyze me. I let the absolute devastation of losing the love of my life break my heart completely. But then something shifted. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My face was pale. I looked weak. I looked like a victim. And in that moment, a quiet, freezing cold voice echoed in the back of my mind. No, I thought. I built you, David, and I can take you apart. I turned on the cold water and splashed my face. I watched the tears wash away down the drain. I made a promise to myself right then and there. I was not going to cry anymore. I was not going to scream, or throw his clothes on the lawn, or confront him in a hysterical fit of rage. That is what he would expect. That is what a weak woman would do. I was going to be smart. I was going to be silent. If he wanted to play a game of chess with our lives, I was going to make sure it ended in checkmate. I wiped my face dry, fixed my hair, and walked out of the bathroom. I put the tablet exactly back where I found it. When David came downstairs, smelling of expensive soap and smiling his usual charming smile, I looked at him. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, completely oblivious. I smiled back. A perfect, flawless, terrifying smile. "Everything is perfect, David. Dinner is almost ready." The war had officially begun. The next 3 months were the hardest of my entire life. I had to become an actress worthy of an Oscar. Every single day, I woke up next to a man I absolutely despised. I made his coffee. I kissed him goodbye. I listened to him talk about his stressful days at the office, knowing exactly whose office he had been in. I was a ghost walking through my own life, smiling on the outside while meticulously plotting his total destruction on the inside. Playing the long game takes a toll on your soul, but the desire for justice is an incredibly powerful fuel. As soon as David would leave for work, my real job began. I hired the most ruthless, aggressive financial lawyer in the state, a woman named Jessica, who took one look at my evidence and smiled a terrifying, predatory smile. Together, we hired a private forensic accountant. Because I was legally a co-founder and a 50% shareholder of the company, I had the right to access everything. We quietly combed through a decade of financial records. What the accountant found was worse than I thought. David hadn't just bought Chloe a house. He had been skimming money from the company for over 2 years, funneling it into dummy corporations to hide his wealth from me. It was corporate fraud, tax evasion, and a massive breach of marital assets. He was leaving a paper trail of absolute arrogance, convinced I was too naive and blindly in love to ever check the books. He thought I was just the quiet, supportive wife who cared more about picking out throw pillows than reading a profit and loss statement. He forgot that I was the one who balanced our budget when we only had $20 to our name. While Jessica prepared the legal trap, I prepared the personal one. I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. I hired a private investigator who documented everything. He got photos of David and Chloe at the new house. He got audio of them talking at a private dinner, where David explicitly laughed about how clueless I was, saying, "Elena is so comfortable. She wouldn't notice a hurricane if it blew through the living room." Hearing that audio almost broke my composure. My hands shook with rage, but I channeled that anger. I used it. I quietly transferred my original half of our liquid savings into a secure, separate account, perfectly legal, as my name was on it. I secured the deed to my late mother's property that he had tried to leverage for a business loan. I slowly packed away my most treasured personal items, moving them to a secure storage unit piece by piece. A book here, a piece of jewelry there. He never noticed a thing. Then, the perfect opportunity presented itself. David's firm was hosting its 10th anniversary gala. It was going to be the biggest event of the year. Investors, local politicians, business partners, and our entire social circle would be there. David had been stressing about it for weeks, wanting it to be the ultimate showcase of his success. Chloe, of course, was going to be there, parading around as his brilliant new designer. David came home one night, exhausted, and laid his head in my lap. "I don't know what I would do without you keeping things stable at home, Elena," he sighed, closing his eyes. "This gala is going to take us to the next level." I stroked his hair gently, looking down at the man who had stolen 10 years of my life. "I know, David," I whispered softly. "This gala is going to change everything. I promise you that." The night of the gala arrived. I wore a stunning emerald green dress, my hair and makeup done to absolute perfection. I wanted to look my best, not for him, but for myself. When we walked into the grand ballroom of the downtown hotel, flashbulbs went off. David held my waist tight, playing the role of the devoted, successful husband for the cameras. The room was packed with over 200 people. The champagne flowed, the jazz band played, and the atmosphere was electric. Across the room, I spotted Chloe. She was wearing a sleek black dress, holding a glass of wine and shooting secret, longing glances at my husband. It was almost pathetic how confident they both felt. At 9 p.m., it was time for the speeches. David walked up to the grand stage, adjusting his expensive tuxedo. He tapped the microphone and the room fell silent. He gave a charismatic, glowing speech about the company's humble beginnings. He talked about vision, about hard work, and about integrity. Then he looked directly at me in the front row. "But I could not have done any of this without my rock, my beautiful wife, Elena," he said, placing a hand over his heart. "She is the heart of this company. Let's give her a round of applause." The room erupted into applause. People smiled and raised their glasses to me. David motioned for me to come up to the stage. This wasn't planned, but it was absolutely perfect. I gracefully walked up the stairs and took the microphone from his hand. He put his arm around my shoulder, expecting me to say a few sweet, humble words. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the investors. I looked at Chloe, whose smug smile had faltered just a bit. And then I spoke. "Thank you, David." My voice echoed clearly through the massive speakers. "It's true. We built this company from nothing. 10 years of trust, loyalty, and complete transparency." I turned to look at him. His smile was still frozen in place, but I could see a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Which is why it brings me so much joy to announce a new chapter tonight," I continued, turning back to the audience. "As of this afternoon, my legal team has officially filed for a complete dissolution of our marriage and a massive civil suit against David for the embezzlement of over $2 million of company funds." The entire ballroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The air was sucked out of the room instantly. David's arm dropped from my shoulder as if I had burned him. "Elena, what are you doing?" he hissed under his breath, his face turning pale white. "Are you crazy? Turn the mic off." I ignored him. I reached into my small clutch purse and pulled out a sleek, black USB drive. "For the board members and major investors present," I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion, "my attorneys have already emailed you the complete forensic accounting reports. You will see exactly how your investments have been siphoned off into shell companies to fund a secret real estate purchase for David's mistress, Chloe." I pointed directly at Chloe in the crowd. Every single head in the room snapped toward her. She gasped, dropping her wine glass. It shattered on the marble floor, a loud crash in the deafening silence. "Elena, stop." David panicked, lunging for the microphone. But I stepped back, holding up a manila envelope I had stashed behind the podium earlier. "I am officially stepping down from my role," I said loudly. "David, you wanted me out of the company so you could have it all. Well, congratulations. It's all yours, including the upcoming IRS audit." I slammed the thick manila envelope onto his chest. He fumbled and caught it. They were the divorce papers, the lawsuit, and the restraining order regarding my personal assets. David looked like he had seen a ghost. His jaw was slack, his hands shaking violently as he looked at the papers, then at the stunned investors, and finally at me. The charming, powerful CEO was gone. In his place stood a terrified, exposed fraud. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just gave him that same, flawless smile. "Enjoy the rest of the party, David," I whispered into the microphone. I dropped the mic on the podium. I turned my back on him and walked down the steps. The crowd literally parted like the Red Sea to let me through. Nobody said a word. The sheer shock held everyone hostage. I walked straight out the double doors, out of the hotel, and into the cool night air where my waiting car was parked. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I felt a massive, heavy weight lift off my chest. I was free. The fallout was spectacular, swift, and absolute. When you build a life on a foundation of lies, it doesn't take much for the entire house to collapse. By the next morning, David's investors had frozen all company assets. The board held an emergency meeting and ousted him as CEO pending a criminal investigation into the embezzlement. Because he had used corporate funds for personal real estate, the authorities were heavily involved. And Chloe? The moment the money stopped flowing and the beautiful townhouse was seized as marital property by the courts, her undying love for David magically evaporated. She packed her bags and left the state, blocking his number. He was completely alone. The divorce proceedings were a slaughter. Because I had the forensic evidence of his financial crimes, the judge showed zero mercy. I walked away with exactly what I was owed, the initial capital I invested, my rightful half of the legitimate profits, and my absolute freedom. David was left with mountains of legal debt, a ruined reputation, and a severely compromised future in the business world. It has been 2 years since that night at the gala. I used my funds to start my own consulting agency, helping female entrepreneurs secure and protect their businesses. I am thriving, happier, and more at peace than I have ever been. My home is filled with light, laughter, and genuine friends. When someone betrays you, especially someone you gave everything to, it feels like the end of the world. You feel foolish for trusting them. You feel entirely empty. But the truth is, betrayal is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their character. David thought my kindness was a weakness. He mistook my unwavering support for blindness. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, and I would simply fall. But what he didn't realize is that when you push a strong person into the dark, they don't disappear. They adapt to the dark. They learn to see clearly. And when they finally come back into the light, they are untouchable. If you are ever faced with a betrayal that shatters your world, remember this. Do not let their actions turn you into a victim. Feel the pain, mourn the loss, and then wipe your tears. Gather your strength, make your plan, and walk away with your head held high. You do not have to settle the score with anger. You settle it with success, with boundaries, and by taking back your power. Because the ultimate revenge isn't just destroying the life they built on lies. The ultimate revenge is building a beautiful, honest, and wildly successful life without them.